SenVStyle.com. 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 SenVStyle.com.
Welcome to the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm your co-host, Adrian Guest, along with co-host Devin Dito. Today is February the 27th, and we're in weekly Roundup number 7. So, Devin, we got plenty of news to bring to our viewers today, so we probably should get right on into it. Our first segment, viewers, is going to start off with topic, talking about the Conservative Political Action Conference. One of the things that I saw while looking at their conference is that it seems like they're maybe living in a multiverse or some sort of alternate reality. When you look at the, yeah, I know, Devin, it's funny. When you look at the lineup, I mean, you can really see that they are really, really pro-Trump still. Mike Pence, he declined an invitation, and I think because Senator McConnell finally stood up against Trump, they didn't even give him an invitation. But nevertheless, the convention is underway. The big thing about this, viewers, that we really wanted to talk about with this convention, obviously you got, Donald Trump there and a lot of his sycophants. But what really, really happened that was big news for us happened yesterday from Senator Josh Hawley. And this is a U.S. senator, so this is why this actually has some relevance to what we're talking about. You had a U.S. senator, say that we're proud to be in a country that liberated slaves. Devin, that's what we have, a U.S. senator, someone who's supposed to be making decisions for the American people, thinking that the United States liberated slaves, totally ignoring the fact of history, totally ignoring the fact of systemic racism. He sees that the 1619 Project is just falsehoods and lies, and that this whole movement to really tell history the way it is false. I mean, it's just something that the media and liberals are pushing. But he's saying that they're trying to reclaim history and show that America is good and that they're proud to be American. So, Devin, that's just kind of what's going on. I don't know what you think about it, but to me, that's like a multiverse, because it really ignores the fact that the Constitution really established and protected slavery. I mean, it was really terrible. So, what universe is Josh Hawley living in? Oh, yeah, yeah. It's, it just reminds me of the fact that, right now we're really trying to compete against a voice that's trying to say, history is one thing and we're not really trying to paint it the right way. That's why you saw the whole push for the 1776 Commission, right, instead of trying to tell the history through lens, which is what we've always, been fighting against, really, really trying to tell the American history the correct way.
And that's where we are with Senator Hawley, and that there seem to be competing versions of the founding of the country, where you have what Senator Hawley put out there, where America is a country that liberated slaves, rather than a country that used slave labor to economically benefit from it and become politically powerful and break off from Britain and start a whole new country. It's not as if when 1776 came, slavery just magically ended. It almost took 100 years after that. That's when slavery was finally, ended, and I guess you could say slaves were liberated. But Adrian, to me, it just comes off as that same attitude that we've always talked about, which is this mentality that people have that slaves and African Americans should somehow be grateful for being in America. And it's like, why are you complaining? We liberated you. Why are you complaining? We gave you the civil rights movement. Why are you it's like this idea that somehow we are just totally and wholly ungrateful, and that the wrongs that we keep bringing up, we need to just get over and move past it, because look how much the country has done for us. They've liberated us. And it's just, it's a very narrow view of American history. And I understand, too, you can talk about slavery and the atrocities that happened then, while also saying that you support the ideals of what America is trying to be. You can do both. I mean, just because you critique the country doesn't mean you don't want to be here and that you don't like it, and that, just because the country has its issues. There is a problem with systemic racism, but you can also then, on the flip side, say we want the country to improve, which is what African Americans have done from the very beginning. We could have very easily given up and said this country is never going to respect us for what we are, and recognize the accomplishments and the things that we've given to get the country to where it is today. And so I get it, but telling this version of the story does not help anybody. It does not make you more patriotic to romanticize, slavery, or act as though slavery was not a foundation that the country was built on. It was the economic backbone for most of this country. You cannot ignore that. So we're just saying don't write off, parts of the, the history in, in the name of trying to be a patriot. You're doing everybody a disservice when you do stuff like that. And so, and just to give,
Exactly.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and it shouldn't be one of those things where you view it that because we're talking about this, you're taking something away or you're trying to demonize someone. It's not that, whenever we talk about, the 1619 Project, which we're going to plug the fact that we did an episode.
Yeah,
so
yes, we did.
you haven't, you go and listen to that. But whenever you talk about that, you're not trying to deny, or try to spin it and make people seem like they're malicious. You're just telling history as it is. I mean, we've talked about, in another episode that we'll be releasing, we talked about the fact that, throughout history, the majority white class has always tried to preach to us to be nonviolent. But we've always seen where they've always been violent. I mean, whether it's throwing tea in the sea, or rebelling against the king, or different things like that. It's always been rebellion. So we're just trying to say that whenever you look at minority communities, it's not necessarily this whole liberating thing. It's actually pretty dark and grim, and it's just us trying to tell the American history in the true way, not trying to take away anybody's right to be a patriot. Not trying to say we don't love being in America. I enjoy living in America, but that doesn't mean that America can't own up to its failures that that it did in the past.
But yeah, I mean, that's the point. That's all we're trying to say with this, and that's why we started the show, which was just to get an understanding out there that people like Josh Hawley, and the people who have an issue with the 1619 Project, and the folks who have a problem with us talking about slavery and what it means for the country we currently live in, you're to get to where you say things like what Josh Hawley says, you have to ignore proven facts. Proven historical facts. You have to ignore a lot of things, and it's not as if the 1619 Project did not go through the work to make sure that the documents that they were seeing, the artifacts, they literally have bills of sales for slaves that are signed by people. Like, this is not made up. Like,
not to mention, Devin, whenever you talk about liberation, remember Juneteenth, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, there were several slaves that weren't even free right away.
No, and that's the thing. It's like, liberated how? Like, they were freed and then discriminated against for another century. Like, it's not as if they were freed in I think it was 1895 when they finally got to Texas, and then all of a sudden they were allowed to do everything they wanted to. No. If you look at the document that they were presented with, we just learned this with Mary Elliott, it said it was not an employee-employer relationship. So it's not as if they were free to go off and do what they wanted to. They had to still live with their former masters and be in this quasi-enslaved state, which is not liberation. I mean, I don't know what you call Jim Crow. Was that liberation? Like, what was it's not as if, we have, like, this country's done a great thing for us by putting us through slavery and Jim Crow and black codes and mass incarceration. It's not as like, I understand, we talk about it a lot, but I think we do because you have people like Senator Hawley who go out there and try to twist the message. This is why we have to hammer this message home every chance we get to not only, make sure it's out there, but to correct the record. When people like Josh Hawley go out there and try to spout this nonsense, trying to paint a different picture, we're just trying to make sure that the true history of where we started is out there. Not saying that it's a racist country today. It has problems, but it is okay to critique it in search of a more perfect union, which is the only thing we're focused on. So we just wanted to make those points and to kind of, still talking about slavery, but switching gears, we wanted to talk about, reparations. And so this week we got some news. So if you didn't know, former President Obama, has started a new podcast with Bruce Springsteen. It's called Renegades, Born in the USA. And they had their first episode on, I believe, Tuesday. And so President Obama had some interesting comments regarding why he didn't necessarily push for reparations. And so he, on the podcast, he said he supports reparation. But he said the reason he didn't really push for it was because of what he called white white resentment and resistance to the idea of reparations. And so he said during his presidency, he saw, talk of white resentment, but also talk of welfare queens. We've heard that before. Talk of, the undeserving poor, and then a backlash against affirmative action. So, Adrian, essentially what, President Obama says is like when he got to office, reparations was kind of a non-starter. And I can see that when you have the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, trying to say that he's going to be a one-term president. And then you have Mitch McConnell also saying that, black people should be grateful and not want reparations because we got a black president, as if that was somehow just allowed to happen. So, and Adrian and his, when he was talking about his support of reparations, he's largely talked about what we've been talking about, which is that a large portion of the power of this country, the wealth of this country, the political power of this country was built on the backs of slaves. And you can't say it was a majority of it or a small part, but it was a large portion of the early power this country got was built off free labor from slaves. And yes, they should be, the descendants of those slaves should be compensated for that. And so, Adrian, it's interesting to see why, because reparations wasn't a huge topic when he came into his presidency, but it is now. So it's interesting to kind of see what he had to say about that.
No, I agree. And I think whenever you think about, President Obama's, first term, and you think about the rise of the Tea Party, and you think about the birtherism movement. I mean, you think about all these different things that he had to come against while trying to, create a healthcare system that could give millions of people healthcare. I mean, it was just really, almost too much on his plate to put, reparations on there. I mean, I think that as African Americans, we expected, President Obama, the first African American in office, to come in with these sweeping movements for Black people. But what we forgot is that we live in America. America has historically always tried to put Black people down. So just the fact that we have someone that looks like us, commander in chief, and live in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that doesn't take, the fact that the true power lies in, people who are special interest groups and lobbyists, and a lot of the, congressmen and senators, that's where a lot of the power lies. And unfortunately, they're still antiquated and think that America should, be run like the 1800s. So I don't think that we should be surprised by President Obama's comments. And I think that we just probably expected too much out of him because, he just couldn't deliver. I mean, you look at the fact that, in the United States, I mean, the struggle of the wealth gap, I mean, on average, a white family in the United States has about $171,000. In annual net worth. And that's 10 times higher than the average net worth of a Black family. I mean, you're talking about great disparities here. And whenever you talk about addressing these things, I think maybe President Obama could have taken a different position to address reparations in a different way that would have been more acceptable. We're seeing these pushes for, maybe grants towards, scholarships for tuition and things of that nature, maybe some loans towards opening businesses. Maybe there was a better way for him to present it that could have sold a little bit better. And I think that, Devin, that's the thing that we need to be talking about with the reparations conversation. I think when most people hear, they're thinking that, Blacks are just going to be getting checks in the mail and direct deposit from the IRS. And it doesn't have to be that way. And it shouldn't be that way, because that's not going to really tackle the issues of institutional and systemic racism. So I think it's great that he came out and, finally said something, Devin. But I still say that he could have done more.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the legacy of President Obama, that he just left you wanting more. I get the idea of politically it's probably not doable, but we could have at least had the discussion. We could have had a president who said, okay, I at least support starting a commission to look at the possibility of, providing reparations and things like that. But we didn't even get there. And so I get what he was trying to do. He was probably thinking about, re-election and what that's going to look like. And so I think he was in a difficult position, but he could have at least broached the subject more rather than just totally avoiding it, in public. And I know it's going to start a firestorm, but you have to, being the first, black president. Those are things that we expected, and I get why he did it, but I'm like you, he could have, brought it up in a way that people would have understood. And look, I mean, you don't have to support the idea of sending checks to people. Adrian said it could be, community programs, block grants for businesses, scholarships with schools, but understand that it's not just about, compensating for slavery. It's everything that happened afterwards, black codes and especially redlining, because a lot of people's wealth in this country is tied to their homes. We know this is true, and we saw this after the 2008 financial crisis, where you saw half of black wealth be wiped out because people were losing their homes. Those are the things we're talking about, and that's why the racial wealth gap continues to be a problem, because we just have ignored, the things that have been done, to African Americans on a financial level, economically, educational. Those things we cannot just ignore and say you need to just get over it because the rules of the game are supposedly fair today. We need to go back and repair some of those wounds and put actual money. Listen, we can find money for a lot of things. We're getting ready to spend $1.9 trillion to pay for testing and COVID vaccines and to send, a $1,400 check to people. If we can do that, we can find money, for reparations to heal these wounds and to close or try to, lessen the racial wealth gap. But we need to at least have the conversation because it is necessary. And so we just wanted to. Yeah, go ahead.
And I mean, and I was going to say even further that it's necessary because one of the things that we saw, viewers, is that Citigroup Bank actually conducted a study. Looks like it, goes back as far as 2000, where they actually put a number to, racism and to this, economic racism is a better way to say it. And they came out with 16 trillion. 16 trillion, that's a huge number, 16 trillion in lost GDP by noting 4 key areas of racial, gaps with African Americans and whites. And this is really interesting. You should look at it from NPR viewers, but they talk about 13 trillion lost in potential business revenue because of discriminatory lending to African Americans, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated. I mean, you're talking about 2.7 trillion in income loss because of disparities, 218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of housing credit. I mean, we talk about racism as if it's this thing that's so abstract and so, we can't, figure out what it is. We can't define it. But Citigroup Bank, they put a dollar amount. And here in America, where capitalism is king, dollars and cents makes, that makes a lot of sense, for lack of a better way to put it. So this is why, viewers, the Black Agenda, you may hear us talking about these issues so much. But when you have a bank coming out and saying that this is costing us 16 trillion, and if you're a Republican and you're conservative and you think about our debt, 16 trillion would really help with that debt, Devin.
Heck yeah. I mean, that encapsulates it right there, that the racism and discrimination and the redlining, it has a cost to it. And oftentimes we have to pay more for interest rates and loans and cars and houses. That's money that could be going towards a house, or, it could be going towards a business. It could be going towards putting your kids through school. But no, we're having to pay that in extra interest on other things only because of the fact your skin color. And that's where we are. And so you can say it's for other things, but history has shown us it seems to be a habit of banks and lenders to charge more for black people than other races. And so that is something we need to fix. We need to fix our credit system and how we, what we're using to come up with these credit scores, why recurring things like paying rent and light bills are not included in that is an issue. And we need to fix that too. So reparations could be a lot of those things. And so we just wanted to make sure we touch on this, to give our thoughts about it, but also just to kind of get the conversation going and get people to understand it does not have to be a check necessarily. It can come in very many different forms as far as some kind of reparations program for community grants and things like that. So that's going to do it for our first segment here. Before we go to break, we do have a quick tidbit here about the minimum wage. And so some financial news here. So we did get news. The $1.9 trillion coronavirus package did pass the House, but it will not include a $15 minimum wage when it lands in the Senate. And so Democrats try to push for a $15 minimum wage through special rules, but the Senate parliamentarians said they could not determine that the increase did not comply with the rules and effectively killed the momentum for it. And so some are advocating for Vice President Kamala Harris to overturn this ruling, while Democrats are seeking other options like a budget reconciliation to get this increase through. Republicans, shockingly, Mitt Romney, I think Senator Tom Cotton, put out a bill, their own minimum wage bill. It would be a $10 minimum wage that would be phased in to 2000. I think it would make it to $10 by 2025. So it's interesting. It's actually, I think, Adrian, this breaks it down, I want to say, by age. There's actually like a youth minimum wage, and then there's an adult minimum wage. It's actually, it got my attention because I was like, well, I've never actually thought about it in that way. But it's interesting. You know, maybe that's something we can look at. But of course, we'll keep you updated on this and what happens with the minimum wage and the Republicans bill. And so we'll continue to bring you updates. So we're going to take our very first break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about Black Lives Matter. And we'll be talking more importantly about their funding. They finally gave some numbers about what they raised last year after the George Floyd protests. So we're going to talk about that. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. Okay. All right, welcome back. So we're going to get into examining some of the money that Black Lives Matter, the organization and foundation, has been raising. And so we're going to start with, so on Tuesday, the Black Lives Matter Foundation finally revealed that they had raised $90 million last year. And a lot of it, of course, we all know, came after the death of George Floyd in May. And so the Black Lives Matter Global Funding, they call it the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, is trying to build an infrastructure for how they can start to disperse some of this money that they've raised. And this is honestly, Adrian, the first time that we've actually got to see real numbers about what Black Lives Matter is doing with their money, how much they've raised. And so they've been around for 8 years, but they're finally giving us a good look at their finances. And the foundation says it's committed about $21 million in grant funding. And we're going to put up a graphic here to kind of spell out some of the specifics around the Black Lives Matter Foundation. And so they've got about $21 million in grant funding that's going to go to official and unofficial Black Lives Matter chapters, as well as 30 Black-led organizations. It ended the year with about $60 million in the bank. And that was after spending nearly a quarter of its assets on grant funds and, what they say, other charitable giving. Also, in this report, the foundation said individual donations via its main fundraising platform averaged about $30.76. And so that's more than 10% of their donations were recurring, which means they were monthly coming in. And then it doesn't say exactly who gave this money. Of course, they're probably not going to name their donors. But Adrian, they said they had $8 million worth of operating expenses, which includes staffing, operating and administrative costs, along with activities that they say such as civic engagement, rapid response, and crisis intervention. And so they're going to be starting, or is formally expanding, a $3 million financial relief fund where they're going to start to give out these micro grants to people at $1,000 each. And so, Adrian, it's interesting. We finally get to kind of see what Black Lives Matter is doing. They've raised a lot of money over the past year, and a lot of people had questions about where exactly was it going, how were they using it, and so we finally kind of get to see, what they're doing with it. So what after reading that, what were your thoughts about that?
Well, Devin, first thing is you don't see, any funding going towards like people on planes and, black jackets or anything like that. You don't see anything crazy like that. I mean, it's great. I mean, I think that, with an organization like Black Lives Matter that has to kind of go up against societal opposition, when you're transparent, that really helps. I mean, I think with nonprofits, a lot of people have this, thought that they're just, squandering their money, paying their, executives and things like that. But when you see that they're really trying to do like survival funds and different things like that, and, micro grants to really help communities, live throughout this pandemic, I mean, it's definitely refreshing to kind of see that. It's. I hope that they can really get their donor network built up so they can really start to give out more of this money, because if they raise 90 million and they only use about 8 million for expenses, there's a lot of money that the organization has to do some good. So the only thing I would say, Devin, out of this is that 2021, we better see BLM doing some major initiatives, some major pushes. That they talk about their platform so much that that whenever you reveal something like this, you've got the money to to really push a major agenda. I mean, you've got enough money to really lobby and really get some things happening within the communities that you're talking about helping. So, Devin, that's what I'm looking at. I'm going to be, kind of like, looking at the Biden administration. I'm going to be holding them accountable, saying, you got all this money now, let us see some action, because you don't need to just be sitting on it.
No, and just again to look at it, 90 million raised, like you say, $8 million in operating expenses, and they ended the year with over $60 million in the bank. I mean, that's an awful lot, like you say, and so hopefully this does start to trickle out into the community at a higher rate. I know they're starting their relief fund, and they're going to be giving about 3,000 micro grants of about $1,000 each. That's great to hear, but again, the focus of the organization should be on, improving the lives of many African Americans and communities who are hurting right now and who were hurting before the pandemic. But I also, I would like to see things to help fix people's credit, things that, maybe give people down payments for homes, those types of things that help start the wealth building process is what I would like for them to try to get into. But also, like you say, they need to put money and start dictating a real agenda here, because they obviously have the money arm of it. Now we need the policy side to start getting behind certain proposals and things like that. So we just wanted to give you an idea of what Black Lives Matter, the organization, is doing. So just to reiterate, they raised $90 million last year, and they have about $60 million is what they ended 2020 with. And so we just want to make sure we hit that point. But also, they're not only raising a ton of money and starting to help people, they also have a curriculum that schools are starting to adopt in teaching the students. And so we noticed this week. There's a story that came out of Erie County in New York, which is taking a great move in incorporating anti-racist principles into their curriculum. And so the Buffalo Public School District which serves about 34,000 students, introduced what they called a Black Lives Matter curriculum. And actually, I didn't know this, but in fact, many schools since 2016 have started to implement similar content into their lessons plan with the goal of creating a more robust material on racial justice, African American history, and structural racism. And now, anything with Black Lives Matter is going to get some kind of pushback. And so this curriculum has received just that. People from the right say it's teaching people to be anti-white and and they say it's inappropriate for schools. And the City Journal published an article by Christopher Rufo that said the district says all white people perpetuate systemic racism, and it shows children a video of dead black children and warning them about racist police and state-sanctioned violence. Adrian, I don't know. I've never seen this curriculum in action, but it's interesting to me that they've chosen this path of going towards students and education, which seems smart in the long run, where you catch them early to hopefully teach them these anti-racist views. But I don't know how I really feel about them getting involved in that, though.
It's
Exactly.
interesting to say. Yeah, it's interesting to say. I think it's great to have a more culturally inclusive curriculum. I think it's great to have a racially diverse, textbooks and curriculum. I think that's all great. But I think that the issue is that, whenever you look at the Black Lives Matter based curriculum, it's pushing things that some people may say is racial justice and some people may say is, gender justice or something else. You look at the associate superintendent, Dr. Fatima Morrell, she really supported incorporating the curriculum in there. She really backed the guiding principles. The guiding principles include restorative justice, empathy, loving engagement, which everybody can probably get behind, even expanding understanding of racial justice. Everybody can get behind those. But whenever you start talking about trans affirming, queer affirming, I think, everyone knows, even with some of our recent episodes, we're all about, everybody on the spectrum. But again, you got to come back to the fact that we live in America, where America has always been about opposing minorities. And, when talking about, queer and trans, those are an even deeper minority, so to speak. So I think that that's probably why, Devin, you're seeing some opposition towards this curriculum, because people are saying that, obviously, I don't know, we can't really authenticate the videos and the dead children, all of that.
Yeah.
There was one material that, where it does state that while all white people and even many people of color play a part in perpetuating systemic racism, it is important to recognize the powerful role played by white elites in maintaining the system. So there is a quote, within the curriculum that does point to white elites, but it can be noted that no one's building their curriculum around that. Nobody's building their lessons plans around that. And they're not really trying to push hard evidence to support that. It's just really just trying to, I feel like, broaden the lens of history. But again, whenever you broaden that lens and you throw in blacks, you throw in trans, you throw in, the different issues like that, it's almost like you're trying to fight two separate issues, Devin. And I think that's why, Black Lives Matter in their curriculum will probably continue to see some sort of opposition because, like I said, a lot of people in America hadn't gotten there with really, accepting trans rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're fighting too many battles at once. And so, listen, before we say anything else, we support, gay rights, trans rights, anything like that. We support that, and we want people to be comfortable. We don't care who you love, just, as long as you're happy at the end of the day, that's all that matters. However, I do think there could be an issue here where you start, mixing different movements within one another. To be frank, it does make the push for the things that African Americans have been hoping for a very long time. It does make that more difficult when you have an organization that's teaching a curriculum to kids in school that, to be anti-racist, but also to be queer affirming and trans affirming, where that's a whole separate issue from black rights at the moment. Yes, there are black people who are queer and trans, but the movement for black people to get reparations and to stop police brutality and to end mass incarceration and end redlining and all these other things, at least in my view, are separate from the queer movement and the trans movement. Those things are really just starting to take hold, and we have a very long way to go with those. And I just, you can disagree, put it in the comments. I just think when you start mixing those movements like that, it's going to take it's going to be a much, much tougher role. And I think when you have an organization that says Black Lives Matter, and it started because of what happened, to Trayvon Martin. I understand the organization was started by 3, queer black women, but it just seems like they're putting their own spin on the movement because of who they are, which is their right to do that. But I do think it does make the goal of black rights and ending police brutality a lot more difficult when you're trying to also push an agenda that has to do with queer and trans rights as well. And so, if you disagree, put it in the comments. But I don't know, Adrian. It does make it a messier case, and of course, people are gonna, we're having an issue right now with trans rights and trans students trying to compete in girls' sports. That's a whole different issue that I don't think people are ready for that conversation.
It is, and I think it's important, viewers, to listen to what Devin said at the beginning. Is that we do support, anyone's, right to, be who they want to be. What we're just saying is that, whenever you mesh the two issues, it's just a messier situation. It's a messier cause to fight for. And I agree. I would definitely say that those issues are very separate. Because whenever you think about, the issue of being transgender versus, someone who's African American, one of the things is you've got to get people to understand what being transgender is. A lot of people don't understand, what it's like to feel that you're, it should be another gender or something of that nature. So whenever you start talking about that, you've got a lot of people who are just like, I don't believe in that. You're born one way, you should be one way. And that's totally different when we're talking about, African Americans going through years of oppression, years of racism and discrimination, 2 separate issues. And that's not to say that, you can't fight for both, but we're saying that one should be fought in maybe in another organization and the other should be fought in another organization, just because it makes the cause that you're fighting for a lot harder to accomplish. Because when you start talking about these things, then you've got a whole another group of people saying, well, if y'all are going to talk about this, well, why can't we talk about maybe, doing some reparations for Native Americans, or why can't we start doing reparations for, women are underrepresented. So let's do a whole move for, women, or let's do a whole move for Latino Americans, or a whole move for Asian Americans. What we're saying is you're fine to do movements, but what we're saying here is that this is Black Lives Matter. If that's going to be your whole mission, if that's your whole, name, it's almost like, what Devin's saying, if you're going to try to spin it, you should spin it in a more productive way. And again, hopefully the founders of BLM will see this and they'll want to be on our podcast and go toe to toe with us to talk about it. But I think we at the Black Agenda, we're on the same page to say that this is a messy situation. It's good that they're trying to have a more culturally diverse curriculum. It's good that they're trying to show that, we should be a global society. Everybody's involved with each other, understanding each other's differences. We love that. We support that. But it's just that it just makes it harder. And I feel like right now, with so many things going on for our communities, with trying to get better policing, with trying to get, more loans for entrepreneurs, with trying to get more loans for housing, this is going to be something that's going to take the focus off. And you're going to have people like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. I mean, they'll eat this stuff up alive and going to say that, we can't support anything for BLM because they're talking about, tearing up the family and, doing that kind of stuff. So it's just such a messy deal, Devin. So, that's what I think.
No, I agree. And just, before we go, just a historical context here. The reason why I think this is an issue is because if you look back at what happened during the civil rights movement with the passage of the civil rights legislation, it did not just include race. It also included gender and religion and a lot of other categories. Not saying that that's wrong, but when you look back at what happened with the civil rights legislation, African Americans were not the predominant benefactor of that legislation. It was actually white women who benefited, especially during when you had the affirmative action programs. It did not benefit us the most, and that's the only thing we're worried about, is something like that happening. Like you say, reparations, it could expand into reparations for every other minority group when it's African Americans who push this thing to the forefront in the first place. And then we end up getting kind of the short end of the stick, because the things we're pushing for is now the benefits are going to everybody, when our communities are really the ones who are still being hurt by the current and past policies. So that's all we're saying. It's just we don't want a repeat of history here where we get left in the dark again, wondering, what happened to all the protests and the movements that we had to get here. And so just wanted to make that point there before we go. But before we go, we do have some more news for you. A financial services giant, TIAA, has named a black CEO. And so it's a black female. Her name is Thasunda Duckett. Thasunda Brown Duckett, actually, is her name. And she's going to be the CEO at TIAA, which is a financial services company. This would make her the first woman to be in this role for the company, and she's only the second ever black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Duckett is 47 years old, and she came over from Chase Bank, and of course she's making big moves, big waves in the financial world. And so we just want to make sure to give you that nugget before we go. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll have more news, this time about McDonald's being sued for discrimination. And then we'll also take a look at another movement, another group that's pushing for the end to mass incarceration. So we're going to take another quick break, and stick with us, and we'll be right back. Oh, my music.
Nice. That was about 18 minutes. All right, viewers, welcome back. Let's get into our third segment here. Again, we're going to be talking about McDonald's being sued. And it's so interesting that they're being sued by black franchisees, because I feel like McDonald's probably makes so much money off the African-American community, but here they are being sued. So viewers, just to give you a little background about it, this comes from Mr. Herbert Washington, who played with the Oakland A's in the mid-'70s. He's actually filed a lawsuit against McDonald's, and this came out from Tuesday out of Ohio. So what Mr. Washington is alleging is that McDonald's regulated black owners into restaurants located in impoverished neighborhoods. Washington claims that the manipulation created nearly a $700,000 sales gap between black-owned restaurants and white-owned restaurants. And this is all coming according to the Detroit News. So we always tell people we like to verify this and not just bolster a bunch of our opinions. So this is coming from an actual news statement. And they were saying that by relegating black owners to the older stores in the toughest neighborhoods, McDonald's ensured that black franchisees would never achieve the level of success that white franchisees could expect. Washington lawsuit comes from it comes after 52 black former franchisees sued the company for racial discrimination last year. And this was reported by the Griot. The plaintiffs went on to say that McDonald's pushed them into high-risk neighborhoods, and that they really are seeking money to kind of make up for this damages. Looks like they're seeking about $1 billion in damages. This is, it's a really impressive story. I mean, you've got people who are saying that McDonald's is basically putting them in the high risk areas, impoverished areas. They're having to basically use more of their money to actually operate the business, while white franchisees are really in easier neighborhoods and they're able to really, reap the benefits of their hard labor. It's really interesting, Devin, to kind of to see the news out of this, and it almost, whenever you see the math behind it, it kind of makes sense.
No, it really does, and it just it goes to show you, discrimination kind of exists everywhere. I mean, putting them in the toughest neighborhoods means higher security costs, higher insurance costs, which, like you say, is money going towards other things that could be going towards either the business or it could be going to the franchisee to do other things with. And so, of course, with the pandemic, I'm sure that made that job even tougher. Not only being in a unsafe neighborhood or a bad neighborhood, but also being in a neighborhood hit hard by the pandemic. They're really struggling. And so it just goes to show, the continued struggle of trying to be a black business owner, especially a franchisee of a large company like McDonald's. They have issues as well. And, like I say, COVID has been hard, and a lot of black business owners also missed out on PPP loans to add on top of everything else that's going on. And so, it just goes to show it doesn't matter whether you're a former baseball player, millionaire, it doesn't matter. Discrimination is discrimination, and they don't care where you came from, how much money you have. As long as you're a black person, it's very likely you're going to end up with things like this. And I'm glad that they're taking it, to court, and hopefully they get the settlement that they need. $1 billion is a lot, but we'll see. And I think we just wanted to make sure we touch on it, that these things are happening. And so $700,000 in sales gaps between black-owned and white-owned franchises is humongous, and it just feeds into the problems we're having with the black racial. The racial wealth gap and income inequality, all these things are kind of tied into it. And so these are not victimless instances, like
not at all.
No.
And I mean, McDonald's, they did come out and try to defend themselves by saying that over the years they offered Mr. Washington guidance and help. They even released a statement saying that Mr. Washington's situation is a result of years of mismanagement by Mr. Washington, whose organization has failed to meet many of the standards, such as people, operations, guest satisfaction, and reinvestment. So they're basically just saying it's his fault. Mr. Washington is saying, no, it's because of these things, like putting us in higher risk areas where we've got to put more in towards security and things of that nature. So I think, Devin, when we see this case, we're probably going to see this kind of reverberate throughout the industry. There's probably going to be other food chains who are going to go through similar lawsuits, other organizations who are going to go through similar lawsuits. And this just really just furthers the argument that we've been talking about throughout this whole episode, Devin, is that, America continues to try to put our people down. And I mean, it's sad that we keep having to see case after case after case of this, this sort of, foolishness happening. But it keeps happening. I mean, like we said before, McDonald's makes so much money off the African-American community that, I mean, it makes, it's silly that they're not trying to bolster more of their black franchisees towards success, because that's just going to further their profit lines and further their margins at the end of the day. So yeah, Devin, it's shameful and appalling. I mean, I hope that they do more than just a statement. I mean, just saying that, well, it's his fault for, mismanaging his business. I think when you've got 52 other franchisees who are alleging the same thing, it's not like just a one, happenstance or one random occurrence. This is, 52 other, business owners who've been successful, but they've really tried to, fight against really hard odds. So yeah, viewers, we're going to keep you in the loop on this because I think it's going to be a interesting story. Like I said, I expect to see it coming and going into multiple industries. So, Devin, any other thoughts on that?
No, no, I think you hit it on the head there. I think we just wanted to get it across, get your attention on it. These are the things that people really need to be focusing on. Yes, we need to pay attention to people who are, racist and are overtly racist. But these are the stories here. This kind of discrimination that tends to hide in society. These things have consequences long, after we leave here. These people are missing out on millions, could be millions, thousands of dollars of wealth that they could be building, but they're not because McDonald's is pushing them into areas that are not as profitable. But they're not doing that to the white franchisees apparently, and so 52 people is not an accident. 50 people saying the same thing is not an aberration, and so hopefully they, rectify it. Compensate them however, whatever they need to do, they need to do it to fix this. And so our next story here, we're going to move to kind of criminal justice. And so we saw an interesting story here. I think came from blacknews.com, but we wanted to touch on this too. And so there's a new movement that's brewing to push to an end to end mass incarceration. And so this movement is started by a group called Save Robert Wise Green Coalition, and is led by the Exodus Foundation and the Baptist Ministries Conference of Richmond and vicinity. And so the coalition is starting the year with an international call for all people of faith and goodwill to resolve over incarceration with radical grace and mercy. The coalition wants to see the movement.
Too lofty of a goal.
I know, right? Radical grace and mercy. You're reaching. But the coalition wants to see the movement start locally, with Virginia Governor Ralph Northam to release inmate Robert Wise Green, as well as other prisoners who have been excessively sentenced and overcharged. And so behind this is Reverend Dr. Madeline McClinney, who is the founder and president of the Exodus Foundation. And she's asking the White House and every governor to use their part and power to free those enslaved to mass incarceration and what they call the new Jim Crow. And so, Adrian, it's a new movement, but it's an old message. We've been saying this for a long time, that these things need to change. But, hopefully, with radical grace and mercy, we can get some real change finally.
Devin, I grew up in a church as a youth pastor, youth minister, and I talked about grace and mercy. But when you're talking about grace and mercy like this, I think the Reverend Dr. Madeline, she's going to have a hard hill to climb to try to get this over, because this is an issue we've been talking about for so long. I mean, we even talked about the lawsuits that's coming out of Mississippi, our home state, about the prison systems there. So it's not an issue that hasn't been talked about before. I mean, when you talk about viewers, just to give you a little background, what this Robert Wise Green, this is an individual who's already served 20 years of a 36-year sentence, and this was from youthful minor offenses. The article didn't really allege what the offenses were, but to go further, Mr. Green has had outstanding recommendations from his correction staff. And he even got hired by a group that works with the prison that helps prepare men to re-enter society. So, I mean, if he's already helping prepare men to re-enter society, but we don't, we say he can't, re-enter society himself, that's definitely a problem there. You got somebody who's teaching people, something, and we say he can't even do it himself. There's a lot of different cases like this, Devin, to where people have been falsely accused. You could go back to the days of the 60s and 70s and things like that. You can go back to a lot of southern states who really do harsh sentencing when it comes to black and brown people. And I always like to throw that in brown because I always like to say it's not just black people who are getting hurt by this, but there's a lot of people who are in prison for just really, really long time for maybe they had a joint or maybe they had a dime bag or something like that. And the cops just really wanted to, overexploit that. And then our justice system just wanted to just lay them in the slammer for forever. So I hope, Devin, that this push for this radical grace and mercy. I hope it's something that really happens. I don't, much like the things that we've been talking about throughout the year, I'm, going to be holding people more accountable. Fortunately, we've got, somebody like Joe Biden in the White House, so maybe he's listening to Reverend McCleany.
Yeah, I mean, some people would say that Joe Biden, he is the one who dictated the crime bill back in '96, and so, this is maybe not on his radar. It absolutely should be. And listen, there are a lot of people who voted for the '96 crime bill who need to accept that they made a mistake back in the '90s. They thought that it was, if you just administered harsher punishments, if you did mandatory minimums for drug offenses, it would somehow deter people from committing these offenses. And it ended up with people for minor drug offenses being in jail and prison for, 10, 20 years. I mean, they made a mistake and they didn't want to admit it. And then we also have a problem with private companies profiting of putting people in prison. And understand, too, that we did have President Trump who signed he signed a prison reform bill. I forget the name, the First Step Act. He signed that, and it did let a lot of people out of prison. But understand, most of the people who are in prison for drug offenses that we're talking about from like the '96 crime bill, they're in state prisons. In places like Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, they have too many black bodies that are locked up for minor drug offenses that they need to go back and release some of these folks, because you're losing decades of people's lives for, like you say, a dime bag, a joint, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. These things are following these folks. And look, at a certain point, we have to understand that sometimes harsher punishments are just not enough. It's not the right way to deter these types of, crimes being committed. And the crux of all of this is the fact that people, are coming from communities that have been chronically poor. And so when you find poverty, you will probably find crime, which is why police like to hang out in black neighborhoods that are run down and poor, because they know that's probably where the crime is going to be. When you have lack of economic opportunity, people are going to fend for themselves. They're going to provide one way or the other. And society in America just is not focused on providing an economic opportunity for a lot of black folks out there. So they turn to the streets to take care of their families. And then they end up getting locked up for 10, 20 years, as like a teenager, just trying to make it out there. I mean, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong, and we need to do something about it. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, you got one chance here. If you don't do this here in 2024, they will get replaced if they don't do something about this. And the people who are in states like Mississippi and Alabama, you need new governors. You need new district attorneys. You need new state attorney generals. Those folks need to be replaced by people who believe in repairing the justice system. And you need to do that by voting. And I think they're coming up, if not this year, next year. State elections are going to be happening. You need to be getting involved in replacing the people who are perpetuating this system. So,
and then I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we leave this subject here, the other thing that we've got to work on is changing, in my opinion, is changing the way society views prisoners. Because I think that whenever you talk about prison reform,
reentry is a huge problem.
People hear prisoners and they're just like, oh, those are, people who don't deserve a second chance. They did something wrong and they should, pay for it, and they shouldn't, be able to make amends. And I think that that's one of the things that we've really got to change in America is how we view prisoners, because whenever we're preaching this message of prison reform, I think that's one opposition that we always get hit against. People don't want prisoners to have some sort of grace and have some sort of mercy. So I think that that's going to be a really big issue, because I know that here in California we had a proposition that was talking about policing and making it harder for people to get out of jail, even though they've had great recommendations from their staff within the corrections facility. But whenever you're coming up against people who say, well, if you're in prison, I don't want you near me, I don't want you in my community, I'm not going to give you a second chance to do good, that can really, really become a problem. So yes, we got to change the legislation and the law, but we also have to work on our society and change the perception that people have upon prisoners. And then that's it on that. But we can't go an episode without talking about COVID. The reason why we do is we've got to honor and recognize the people that we've lost, recognize the people who are fighting the fight. There's a lot of healthcare workers who are still going through this, even though we're not talking about it so much in the media. Another good thing, though, that before we go over the numbers, there was a panel of looks like 22 medical specialists that did approve the Johnson & Johnson single dose. So that's really, really good. With that rollout, we could potentially see a total number of people being vaccinated, being boosted by 20%. Johnson & Johnson said they could maybe stick to their commitment of about 20 million doses by the end of March. So this would be certainly helpful for everybody. Just to give you a number of the rundowns, total cases, we're looking at about 28 million. Total tests, we performed about 351 million. Hospitalizations, doing a lot better than we've done in the past, but we're still at 51,116. And unfortunately, our death count is at 345 Americans lost. So again, we always wanted to honor and recognize those because there's a lot of people who have loved ones who are no longer with us. So we're going to take a break here. This is our last little break here. And when we return, as always, we're going to bring you our quick hits. So stick with us and we'll be right back. Viewers, let's get into our quick hits. As always, we like to bring you some news that you may have missed, some that you may have heard of. To start off with, this is coming from UPS, United States Postal Service. If you don't know this, they're actually going to be introducing some new trucks. So they revealed a new mail truck after years-long competition. The new truck will be built by a Wisconsin-based defense contractor, Oshkosh. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but hopefully. And it can be fitted with both gasoline and electric drivetrains. So that's really awesome. They did have some setbacks, so it won't roll out until 2023. They actually have been looking to replace its existing mail trucks for years now and started taking solicitations for new designs back in 2015. The need for new trucks is urgent. A lot of people are talking about it, saying that the ones that are currently on the road they're actually woefully out of date. They not only have no air conditioning, but they also are a major fire risk. So definitely don't need our people who have all of our mail to be getting burned up and can't deliver our mail. Looks like UPS and Oshkosh don't say exactly how many trucks that will be gas powered and how many will be electric. I think Joe Biden was really hoping that they'll have a complete fleet of electric to kind of go with the Green New Deal and things of that nature. But they're going to be making both, so that way they can have one for gas, one for electric. USPS says that the gas engines will be fuel efficient, low emission. So at least with the gas ones, we can look, for some positivity in that. So yeah, Devin, whenever you go get your mail, you may, I guess in a few more years, we'll be seeing some new mail trucks.
We will, and I'm sure they're excited. I have a really good friend who's a postal worker, and he tells me all the time that their trucks are awful. They don't start, they don't have AC, so it's really ridiculous actually, that's what we're supplying them with. But I hope before 2023 we can get them new trucks. It looks funky. It's almost a Magic School Bus like, but it's a welcomed addition though. They definitely need it.
Hey, they have plenty of windshield,
yes,
windshield space there. That's huge. There's no reason for them not to be able to see.
Yes, and I think that was the goal, is to make sure they could see all the way to the ground. Although it does look really weird for an electric vehicle. So you might be seeing that coming down the street in 2023. So our next quick hit is going to come out of Hollywood, and so you may have heard that Lady Gaga's dog walker was shot, and two of her French bulldogs were actually stolen in Hollywood during an armed robbery. And the singer was offering $500,000 as a reward. And so this happened on Tuesday. Her dog walker was shot once Wednesday night, and they're expected to survive. This is coming from the Los Angeles police department. The man was walking three of Lady Gaga's dogs at the time, but one of them actually escaped, and that dog has been recovered safely. Now, the Associated Press is reporting that both of her dogs have actually been recovered unharmed, and according to Los Angeles police, the person, it was a woman who brought them. She was unnamed. She was not involved in the original theft. She brought the dogs to LAPD's Olympic Community Police Station, and Lady Gaga's representatives did confirm that they were Lady Gaga's dogs. And so a good ending to a crazy story. A dog walker getting shot, but thankfully the dogs were taken care of. They found him, and so everything is at least okay at this moment.
Devin, I'm wondering if that $500,000 went towards that lady that brought the dogs back. That's what I don't know if that was in the report, but I'm wondering. I'm glad that everybody's doing okay, but I'm wondering about that reward.
Yeah, I know,
Uh,
right?
that's a nice one there. But onto some more news out in my neck of the woods, and this is about Tiger Woods. I think everybody is seeing the media coming out about his horrible car accident. Authorities believe that Woods may have been speeding before the incident. They described the road that he was on was a downhill road, is on a curb, and the actual road is known as a trouble spot. I think it's had about 13 accidents since last January. So it says that Woods was driving shortly around 7 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday in Rancho Palos Verdes. So he's around the coastline, driving SUV when his SUV actually veered across two lanes, hit the curb, hit a tree, and then landed on its side. Woods was found in the seatbelt, shocked and calm. There was no evidence of impairment, and the fire department was able to free him and get him to the hospital. But the major thing is that he really had some severe leg injuries. His lower right leg and ankle were broken in more than two places and was exposed to open air. The report said the right leg was basically kind of crushed. Woods had to undergo lengthy emergency surgeries to kind of get the help that he needs. I really think it's going to be a damper on his career. Obviously, everyone knows that, with the crushed right leg, probably harder to walk. And know he was really trying to make a surge back into golf. So we'll be keeping you updated on this as more develops, and hopefully he can rebound and maybe golf a little bit or figure out a different hobby. Hmm. Yeah, it's not many of us that look like us that are in the golf. So definitely, definitely need him there. Yeah.
Oh man, I was muted. Darn it. So let me let me reiterate here. Uh, so we had the Golden Globes yesterday. I put up the graphic there. Viola Davis, Chadwick Boseman nominated because they starred in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which came out on Netflix. And so you can watch the Golden Globes tomorrow night on NBC, but at 5 to 8 p.m. on NBC, hosted by Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. So make sure you catch that tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think everybody with quarantine going on, everybody's always looking for opportunities like this to kind of unwind and watch something. So, yeah, it'll be fun to kind of see, maybe pop some popcorn and see who wins.
Yeah.
Another good story here. This is talking, which really sets us up for our HBCU Awareness Series. March is HBCU Awareness Month, so this is really great. This is coming from well, I guess you could say coming from Morgan State University, kinda. But there was a dropout that they had that's now gone on to be successful. His name is Calvin Tyler. He actually dropped out in the '60s because he couldn't afford college. The tuition was way too high for him. He had to drop out due to the funding, and he actually took a job with UPS. Fast forward many years later, he climbed the corporate ladder all the way up to senior VP of U.S. operations and even joined the board of directors before retiring. So with Mr. Calvin Tyler and his wife, they actually pledged $5 million in 2016 to Morgan State University. And that was to really help people to obviously go to school. But now, 2020 has hit, the pandemic was in mind, and the couple actually pledged an additional 15 million and expanded the eligibility to students anywhere in the United States. So, as of now, you're looking at about a $20 million endowment fund that they set up to really help and fund HBCUs, or rather help fund students to go to HBCUs. The fund is called the Calvin and Tina Tyler Endowment Scholarship Fund. You do have to pass a couple different criteria and qualifications, but if you know someone who is looking to go to college, or maybe you yourself are looking to go to college, consider an HBCU. That's step number one. Consider an HBCU, and if you need help funding it, consider the Calvin and Tina Tyler Endowment Scholarship Fund. Really, really great story, Devin. Someone who had to drop out of college because they couldn't afford it, worked many, many years at one company, and now he's donating, $20 million, more than, Morgan State ever seen before, to really benefit, students to go to college. So that's awesome.
No, that is awesome, and it rings when you're hearing you say that. It almost reminded me of Mackenzie, Jeff Bezos' wife, Mackenzie Scott, I think is her name. She was giving away millions of dollars like that. That's the stuff we really want to see. When we release our HBCU awareness series, we're hoping it attracts that kind of attention for the schools to where they can really take advantage and help out, because times are tough. Money is tight right now, so. That's a great story. And so our last story here, kind of funny for those who, trying to get driver's license in the world of COVID. So there was a California resident who's in Huntington Beach, California. She said she had went to the DMV, and she was, you go to DMV, you try to get you take a new picture and everything. But apparently when she went to take her picture, she waited for the DMV behind the camera to let her know when it was the right time to take off her mask. But when she got up there, she didn't take it off. She got in front. They took the picture, and nobody said a word. So she walked away, and the next thing she took a picture, and the employee did it. But the person realized the mistake and took another one with her mask removed. But for some reason, 7 days later, she got her ID. It was the one with the mask on instead of the one without the mask on. So we'll show you the picture here. It's kind of crazy. This is the first time people have actually they remember seeing this, but there's a picture. So if she gets identified, she has a mask on, a gray mask on her picture. You can only see her eyes and the top of her forehead and stuff. And so I don't know how they're going to identify her if she should ever get pulled over. But her name is Leslie Pilgrim there. You see it. That's the picture, and the California DMV said this is the first time they've actually heard of this happening, and so she paid $35 for an ID to show us her wearing a mask. So this is definitely COVID, COVID. This is definitely pandemic, the pandemic story of the year. I think taking wear a mask.
I assume that they're going to make her get a new photo, but I don't know.
I think I don't know. Let me see here. I think only her eyebrows. They could only see that. They didn't necessarily say. I'll have to double check. They're probably going to send another one though, because you can't take that anywhere. They're not going to let you use that. She's going to get carded at like the bar, and they're going to be like, "What is this? A joke?"
Right, yeah, exactly. Where's the real ID?
Right. Yeah, she's gonna. No, sorry. Just to wrap it up, they did contact her, and they're scheduling for her to have a new picture taken. So
see,
there
we go. Yeah, I figured they were gonna have to have another picture, because you can't have that. But that's really interesting. That does it for our show, viewers. As far as the news and the quick hits. As always, we like to end it with some of the things that we're going to be doing. I wanted to make sure to highlight our 1619 project. I did it earlier, but I'm going to do it again because Mary Elliott, she's awesome. If you don't know who she is, she was a curator for the Smithsonian that worked on the broadsheet for the 1619 project. But she's a dynamic lady, dynamic speaker, laid out a lot of different nuggets and a lot of facts, different things that we didn't know. So if you haven't, please go listen to that interview. Go watch it even. One of the things we wanted to highlight is that on tomorrow, it's the last day of Black History Month. We have a special interview we're going to be releasing. We're going to be having a conversation with Dr. LeGarrette King. He actually specializes in how Black history is taught in schools and society. So we thought that it would be a really great way to end Black History Month with having an episode about him. So definitely make sure you do listen to that tomorrow. If you haven't watched the news, listen to, share it with your friends and say, hey, we got another episode from the Black Agenda to listen to as well. Devin, we've got our lineup for March, HBCU awareness coming up. Yeah. So tell us about the lineup.
Yeah, so this is a big deal for us. So we have next month we'll be releasing an in-depth interview series with interviews that we're going to be having with the university presidents at a lot of HBCUs. And so it's a month-long campaign that we're going to be releasing. And so we have an impressive lineup and excited to bring you schools from all over the country, from Jackson State to Tuskegee, Fisk, Claflin, FAMU. So we already have an interview with Dr. Larry Robinson from Florida A&M. So you can actually go back right now, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, type in the Black Agenda, and you can actually listen to our episode with Dr. Larry Robinson from FAMU. Really great interview to talk to him about what they're doing down there and how they've had to adapt to this pandemic. And for the month of March, you have to look forward to see interviews from Grambling State, like I say, Fisk, Claflin, Hampton,
Howard,
possibly Howard, Clark Atlanta's going to be involved. So every week we're gonna have 2 episodes coming out on Tuesday and Thursday in the month of March. So we're talking 10 episodes almost with people from HBCUs all across the country. You're not gonna find content like that anywhere else. So make sure you go to our YouTube channel, type in the Black Agenda Podcast, subscribe so you don't miss out on the stuff we're gonna have coming up.
And I know viewers, Devin said people, but I'm gonna hype it up. These are mainly presidents.
Yes, presidents, not people, presidents, leaders.
There's still people. But I'm always looking for ways to hype things up. But except for Howard, that's the only one where we were able to get the president. We got their number 2, their chief academic
that's good
officer,
too.
Provost. But these are presidents of HBCUs, so this was a huge undertaking for Devin and myself to do with putting together all these interviews, trying to orchestrate and commit themselves, their time and things like that. So, we're excited. We even, going to be putting out a press release. So you may be seeing us, on CNN, MSNBC, maybe even Fox News will extend us an invitation to come and talk about what we're trying to do. So a really, really huge deal. So we're excited. Be on the lookout for it all month long.
All month long. That's exactly right. And of course, we'll be doing this as well. The weekly roundups will be continuing throughout the month. Our next episode will be next Saturday, March 6th at same time, 7:30 p.m. right here on Facebook and on YouTube. And of course, we always tell you this venture is not free. It does cost a little bit of money to put on a production like this. And so Adrian is going to tell you where you can give us a little bit of money.
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is if you'll go to our website, you can just hit the donate button. All you got to do is go to blackagendapod.com, or while you're listening to one of our episodes, if you listen through Podbean, you can just click on the donate button from there. But the reason you should be giving, obviously it costs us to do this, but we really are looking to take this thing further. We're really about action. I mean, the thing that's what we've been talking about from our leaders. We see ourselves as leaders, so we want to be about action as well. Unfortunately, it does cost money in America to act. We can have these good intentions, but we have to back them with dollars and cents. So we need you. All you can do, or rather, if you can only do $1, start off with $1 a month. That's an easy contribution to start with. It's going to help spread our mission further, and it's going to help us go into our next phase, which is really working with other nonprofits. We're doing a charity of the month, which for the month of March is going to be the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And how awesome would it be for you as a Black Agenda fan to know through your monthly giving, you're able to give to an organization like Thurgood Marshall College Fund, because we're looking to partner with other organizations and spread their mission further. And I mean, their mission is to ensure student success by promoting educational excellence and preparing the next generation of workforce talent through leadership development. So everybody can get behind that mission. Our mission at the Black Agenda Podcast is telling about minority issues and how they affect societal progress. Everybody can get behind that mission. So go sign up, give us $1.
Exactly. That's all we need. We don't ask for much, just a little bit. So lastly, before we go, we always tell you, make sure you like, share, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube now. We're releasing a lot of video interviews, so make sure you follow us at Black Agenda Pod. That's our handle for Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you're on social media, obviously, if you're watching us. So make sure you're following us also, sharing it with your friends, family, coworkers, and anybody else that you're around. So we have some great content. We just need to get it in front of people so they can get educated on the things that are happening in the country and in our community. And so with that, that's going to do it for our show here. Our weekly roundup number 6 comes to an end. And before we go, Adrian, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I was starting to laugh because I realized I guess I should do this, but I did, viewers, if you didn't realize it, but I did put out a one-on-one interview this past Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you haven't, Jake Dean Taylor, an actor that I got a chance to speak with. So if you haven't, go chance to check out that interview. Really trying to put out some different content just to have some fun moments. Talking about racism and reparations are heavy topics. So Jake and I, we were talking about, video games and stuff. So a lot easier to get behind. So definitely wanted to make sure to plug that before we got out of here, Devin.
Good deal. Yeah, make sure you go check that out. And so that's going to do it. We'll be back next week, March 6th at 7:30 p.m. And so until then, we'll catch you next time.